Hello, it's George again. If you fancy reading something absolutely childish that quite possibly may well be the most offensive thing you've ever read, then buy my best-selling book. You can also sign up for my Patreon for hundreds of hours of exclusive content and, of course, check out my own Funky Spectrum website for more videos. Links will be in the description, and like and subscribe here if you want to be kept up to date with all the nonsense on YouTube. Now, let's get to the video. Hello, it's George again, and this is Oil Panic, which is a dual screen game watch. Another one a bit like Bomb Sweeper, where the dual screens aren't necessarily really needed. I think they could have done this on a single screen, but it's also nice to see the stuff taking place on the lower screen, the lower real estate. And it does actually play a part in the game, unlike Bomb Sweeper. You do appear on the lower screen at points and can sort of interact with the stuff on there. Not one of my massive favourites, this one. I think there's better dual screen ones. I still think basically one of my favourite dual screen ones is the Mario Brothers, which is simplistic, but I really love it, in the bottling factory, and also Greenhouse. I really like Greenhouse. I've still yet to play Zelda. Which is apparently the best one. I should hopefully be getting to that very soon as we head rapidly towards the end of the Game & Watch reviews. So I'm really running out of them to review now. I said I was going to do them all. I am. And this is Oil Panic, which is strangely allegorical for a bizarre business practice that took place at Japanese Nintendo HQ, and really was a bit of an in-joke that may not have meant much to the outside. Seems quite innocuous, and it is well known for being the first LCD title to feature a genuine mongoloid. So, without further ado, this is Oil Panic on the Game & Watch. Okay, here we are, All Panic. And you can see his face there. This is the first thing I was going to address. This is actually the first Game & Watch to feature a genuine mongoloid. And you can see him in the middle of the room there. You know, the main character you're playing as is actually a Downs, which is incredible. It's really progressive for the age. I mean, look at his face there. It's unmistakable, but very progressive for the age it was. And this game was allegorical in a lot of ways. It was basically Oiru Panikuru was something that was done in the office of Nintendo, which roughly translates. I mean, it's an anglicised Japanese phrase, but it translates basically to oil panic. And oil panic was when the boss of Nintendo would be stalking around like a fucking panther around the offices, just sort of looking at everyone, looking down at everyone over the rim of his glasses, and then all of a sudden he'd go, "Hoi!" like that, and without further ado, and you heard it here first, he'd have these two lumps that basically went around with him. They were sort of ex-Yakuza or something like that, apparently. But yeah, they would come as if appear from bloody nowhere, and straight away the person that he'd said this to would have like a Hessian sack put over their head. Bloody hell, I've started a fire. It's just like typical if you leave a mongoloid alone with oil and a naked flame. Of course there's going to be a bloody fire. But again, it's a cautionary tale, this, allegorical of what's happened when many mongoloids have been left alone in kitchens. And that doesn't include the guy off LA Law that I was talking about the other day, who was only pretending to be a mongoloid. But yeah, the Nintendo staff would have this bag put over their head, and it was over their head, and then the boss again, and the person would be dragged up by both shoulders, blubbering with tears by this point usually, and dragged away from their chair into the middle of the office, and all the sorts of chairs and tables would be flung apart, and basically the boss would get, "Oh bloody hell, I've just soaked that guy with oil. He looks absolutely livid." It's like the boss of Nintendo. He's like, "Oh, what this bloody oil doing all over my hair? There's no need for that. We can use it on an employee's bottom." And so basically what would happen, and the oil would come out, and that's when the panic would begin, because people, bloody hell, I'm going to have to start a game A. I think that was quite difficult. I was also talking about people putting their balls up each other's arseholes, which I'm going to get into shortly. But yeah, basically the boss of Nintendo would have these people stripped from the waist down. They would be standing there with the bag over their head, trembling. Sometimes they'd actually even be whimpering and would piss themselves because they didn't know what was going to happen. I mean, it's entirely possible they were going to be emasculated with the heel of a hard cobbled shoe, or they were going to have a baseball fielded with extreme prejudice at their glans peni, either of which were not good outcomes. But in this case, this was the lesser of the bad outcomes, but it still wasn't particularly great. But what what would happen would be, like, basically the trousers would come down, then the person would be punched in the guts so they bent double, and then they'd be sort of forced over a chair, and then the boss of Nintendo would pull his own trousers down, and then he would go, oi! Like that, and basically while he was sort of massaging oil into his balls, again looking derisively down over his glasses in a sort of slow horseshoe around everyone who'd gathered around them. And then basically, not his willy, because that would be gay, he was forcing his balls into the bottom, into actually the arsehole of the person that they just like pulled up off the work floor. Just basically, it was sort of, apparently later there was like an interview book done with Nintendo, and this boss was saying that he'd basically done it just a sort of, well, he thought it was actually humorous to begin with. He thought it was really funny, and he discussed it with Miyamoto, and Miyamoto literally couldn't stop laughing about it. But then Miyamoto also thought it was really funny to beat people's penises flat with the sole of a shoe with absolutely brutal force and precision. So basically what would happen would be, the boss of Nintendo would have his balls in the bottom of this member of staff who'd be shuddering and sort of whimpering and pissing themselves, and the big lumps, the bouncer, Yakuza bouncer, would be slapping them around the head and such like that, telling them to shut up and stuff, and the boss would be punching them in the base of the spine, going like, oi, oi, like that. And then just sort of the boss would do what he called the helicopter move, where he'd basically be straddling them and then start sort of slowly stepping round and round. So it was sort of twisting his balls, but his balls were actually, they'd made so much money from Nintendo that he'd managed to get some sort of really strange sort of cyborg spring attachment attached to his balls. So when he wound them up loads, what he could basically do, he would go, oi, and then just like try and stand up. And the weight of the person below him, who was like hunched up like a bunny rabbit sort of underneath his penis with his balls in their arsehole, he would actually be able to lift them up because of this sort of the robocock that he had, and he would pull them up, and then because he twisted his balls around, he would be really flipped up. He would go, oi, again, and then basically the bouncers would lift him simultaneously. One would grab the head, one would grab the feet, and they flip him so he was sort of horizontal, and this office worker was just hanging beneath him. And the office worker, it'd be like if you spin like one of those tyre swings round, loads and loads, and the rope gets all curled up. It'd be like that, and the person would be spinning round and round, and at the same time they would whip the mask off him, whip the Hessian bag off his head, and all the tears and stuff would be like soaking everyone in the office. And like the boss of Nintendo would be shouting out something like, it was like, not burps, it was like something, it was Japanese for like beneficiaries, and he would look round at all of them, and everyone in the office would like crouch down so they were at the level of these tears, and also there'd be oil sort of spraying off from the joint between the bottom and the balls, and this would all be like going in the faces and mouths and stuff, and the bosses above them shouting beneficiaries, and then basically everyone would start like shuddering and all climaxing and pulling at the pants and stuff, and then the boss would be in the middle of the room and he'd go, oi! And that was like the ultimate power for him to like deny the orgasm of all his staff. So he basically edged them all right as close as he could get, and then a massive group denied orgasm, and then just a smug smile would appear across his face, a wry smile just for a couple of seconds, and then he'd be back to sort of looking half closed eyes derisively and just gazing around the office. And he wouldn't walk forwards out the office, he'd actually walk backwards, which people had suggested in the West in one of the Nintendo biographies was actually a reference to Satan with he who walks backwards, but apparently it's got something to do with Buddhist culture and not wanting to get tears and spunk on like the front of your body if you're walking into it. So he would just like go backwards, and then if it got on his bottom or his jacket or anything, the thugs could just wipe it off him. But anyway, that's the long-winded story behind Oil Panic. You wouldn't think, looking at this game, that that's what was actually happening, but harrowing. I mean, people talk, I'd love to go and work in Japan. Would you really? Better you than me. Anyway, Oil Panic, I'll give that, I don't know, quite good. I'm giving a lot of 6s out of 10. I'll give this a 6.5 out of 10. Okay, bye.